I remember the hum of the air conditioning more than anything else. It was steady, almost too steady, as if the building itself wanted to remind me that it did not care about human drama. Outside the wide glass wall of the conference room, New York gleamed beneath the late morning sun. The skyline was sharp and glittering, but inside the room the tension was softer, thicker, and far heavier than any view could balance. On the table in front of me lay the contracts. They were tall, perfectly stacked, printed on heavy cream paper that smelled faintly of ink. $15 billion. That was the number attached to those pages, and I had poured my heart, my mind, and my life into them for months. I checked my notes, rehearsing the talking points for the final signatures. My hands were steady, though my head felt light from too much coffee and too little sleep. This was the kind of day that made years of sacrifice worthwhile. This was the day that justified all the weekends lost and all the friendships I had let wither because work always came first. The door opened quietly and I turned. A young assistant, barely out of college, leaned in. His eyes were wide, his face pale. He did not need to speak for me to know something was wrong. He whispered my name as though he was apologizing for it. "Miss Collins, Mr. Reynolds would like to see you in his office. Right now." For a heartbeat, I stayed still. Then I gathered my notes, smoothed the lapel of my jacket, and nodded. The assistant did not meet my eyes. I looked around the table. Evelyn Grant, the CEO of Grant Holdings, sat across from me. Her face was calm, but her gaze sharp, a hawk watching for any tremor. She tilted her head slightly, silently asking why I was leaving. I forced a confident smile. "Just a moment," I mouthed. Then I left the room. The corridor outside was long and bright, lined with glass offices where colleagues pretended not to notice me walking past. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass. My jaw was tight, my stride quick, but my eyes betrayed something else. Confusion, maybe fear. Victor's office was at the far end, behind double doors that looked more like they belonged to a nightclub than a law firm. I stepped inside and felt the strangeness at once. The shelves that once held books of precedent and statute had been emptied. In their place hung neon art and sleek chrome frames with motivational slogans. "Innovation never sleeps, disrupt or die." It looked like a parody of ambition. Victor was sprawled in his chair, sneakers on the desk, scrolling through his phone with one hand. He looked up when I closed the door and gave me a smile that was more smirk than greeting. "Anna, sit. We need to talk about your future here." I stayed standing. "The contracts are ready, Victor. We can close the deal this morning if you approve the last revision." He waved lazily, as if brushing away a fly. "It is not about the deal. It is about synergy. It is about where we are heading as a firm." The words had the rhythm of a script memorized in front of a mirror. I had heard the same lines in cheap corporate seminars. They did not belong in a conversation about my job. My chest tightened. "You are competent, no one denies that," he continued. "But competence is not enough anymore. We need energy, we need innovation, we need people who think differently." He reached to the side and slid a folder across the desk. Inside were documents printed in black and white. Severance terms, a non-compete, a non-disclosure. "Today is your last day." I did not move. "You are firing me the morning of a $15 billion merger." His eyes flicked back to his phone. "Clara will take over." I almost laughed. Clara, his girlfriend, who had been hired 4 weeks earlier as his assistant. She had never drafted a contract longer than her apartment lease. She did not even hold a license. "She does not know the difference between a clause and a footnote, Victor. That is no longer your concern. You have 1 hour to clear your office. Security will escort you." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tear the phone out of his hands and force him to look me in the eye. But my throat had closed and my hands had curled into fists at my sides. Without another word, I turned and walked out. The corridor felt longer this time. Eyes flickered at me from glass offices, then darted away. In the conference room, Evelyn was waiting. Through the transparent wall, I saw her check her watch, then glance toward the door. She looked up just in time to see me walk past without re-entering. Her lips parted, confusion turning to something harder, but I kept my head high and did not meet her eyes. Security joined me outside my office. They did not speak as I packed my things into a cardboard box. My coffee mug, my favorite pen, my worn reference book with notes scribbled in the margins. I slid my personal laptop into the box and tucked my phone into my pocket. That number was mine, the one clients used at midnight when panic struck, and they had used it long before Reynolds & Co. claimed ownership. 1 hour later, I was in the elevator, clutching the box. The mirrored walls reflected a version of me I barely recognized. The confident attorney who had built a reputation out of nothing was gone. All that remained was a woman holding a cardboard container of her life, watching the numbers tick down as the elevator carried her out of the world she had lived in for years. The lobby was quiet. People walked past without looking. Outside, the city roared with the same careless energy it always had. No one cared that a career had ended on the 52nd floor. No one cared that a billion-dollar deal now teetered on the edge. I stepped into the street, the box heavy in my arms, and for the first time in years I felt truly invisible. The box sat on the passenger seat of the cab like a coffin. I kept my eyes on it the whole ride back to my apartment, as if it might open and spill the last fragments of my career onto the worn vinyl seat. By the time I reached home, the sky had turned the pale gray of late afternoon. I carried the box upstairs, fumbled with my keys, and finally dropped it onto the kitchen table. It made a dull thud that echoed through the empty apartment. I did not take off my jacket. I did not even sit down. I simply stood there, staring at the box, waiting for it to speak. Nothing did. The silence pressed heavier than any courtroom I had ever faced. Eventually, I sank into a chair and pressed my palms to my temples. My body felt both too heavy and too light. I had worked so long without pause that I had forgotten what stillness felt like. It was unbearable. When I finally pulled the lid from the box, the contents looked pitiful. A mug with a chipped rim, a pen that leaked if held too long at an angle, a framed photo from a company retreat where I stood smiling between people who probably already knew I was gone before I did. My laptop sat on top, black and blank, the one object that still felt like mine. I powered it on, and the familiar glow steadied me. Without thinking, I opened my personal files and began to list what I still had. It was almost a ritual, a way of proving to myself that I had not been erased. The templates I had designed over years of trial and error. Notes from negotiations with executives who would never trust a stranger with their secrets. The quiet network I had built, one number at a time, one sleepless night after another. Reynolds & Co. thought they had fired an employee. What they had lost was their foundation. My phone buzzed. I jumped, the sound too loud in the silence. A message glowed on the screen. Evelyn Grant, the new lawyer just asked me what force majeure means. Please tell me this is not real. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. I typed back with careful fingers. I am no longer with Reynolds & Co. as of today. I hope the deal goes smoothly. Her reply came so quickly it startled me. What? Call me. I cannot discuss specifics. Then coffee, as friends. My lips curved despite everything. For the first time all day, the weight in my chest eased. An hour later, another message arrived. Then another. 6 clients in total before the night was over. Some were blunt, demanding answers. Others were cautious, asking only where I had gone. I replied with the same measured line to each of them. I am no longer with Reynolds & Co. I wish you well. The more I typed it, the more it became real. I was no longer theirs. And the truth, sharp and dangerous, was that freedom could be more powerful than a title on a business card. At midnight, I sat at the dining table with the laptop open, contracts spread like puzzle pieces across the wood. My mind raced. If I wanted, I could rebuild. Not tomorrow, not immediately, but eventually. I had the tools. I had the trust. Trust was the only currency that mattered in the end. I closed the laptop, ready to surrender to exhaustion when something caught my eye, a folder glowing faintly at the edge of the screen. Drafts. I did not remember creating it. Curious, I clicked. Inside sat a single file, unsigned, dated last month. The formatting was strange, not mine, sloppy in a way that felt foreign. Yet when I checked the metadata, my name appeared as the author. A chill moved down my spine. I had no memory of writing it, no memory of touching it. I snapped the laptop shut, heart hammering. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe someone had copied my account, or maybe it was something worse, something I did not yet have the courage to name. I told myself I would deal with it later. But I knew, deep down, that whatever hid in that file was not going to disappear. I went to bed but did not sleep. My mind circled back to the folder again and again, to the way my name had stared up at me from a page I had never written. I had lost my job, my office, my title. Yet somehow, in a way I could not yet explain, I had been left with something far more dangerous. The next morning, I woke up to a phone vibrating against the nightstand. For a moment, I forgot where I was. My body still expected the sharp chime of the office alarm, the rush of shower, coffee, subway, office, conference calls. But the ceiling above me was quiet and the light through the blinds was softer than usual. I had nowhere to be. I had no office. The phone buzzed again. A number I recognized but had not seen in years. Lawrence Hale. I hesitated before answering. Hale was the kind of name whispered in boardrooms. His firm, Hale & Carter, had been a rival for decades. Where Reynolds & Co. thrived on legacy, Hale & Carter thrived on precision. He had poached more than one client from under our nose, and I had fought him across the table more times than I could count. He was brilliant, ruthless, and always smiling while he cut you apart. I pressed accept. Anna, his voice was warm, too warm. Rough day yesterday, I hear. I closed my eyes. News traveled faster than I imagined. I am fine, I said. You are not fine. You were the backbone of that firm, and now you are free. I call that an opportunity. I almost hung up. He knew exactly which buttons to press. He continued, unhurried. Clients talk, Anna, they are not happy. They say the new leadership is chaos. They say the merger is slipping. Evelyn is furious. Do you know what she said to me last night? She said she wished you were on her side of the table. My heart stuttered. Evelyn had called him. What do you want, Lawrence? Coffee? Nothing more, I promise. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small cafe near Bryant Park. Neutral ground, though I suspected he chose it because the windows reflected just enough of the street to make people wonder who he was meeting. He thrived on appearances. He stood when I walked in, his suit immaculate, his smile sharp as ever. Anna, he said, as if greeting an old friend. I sat, folded my hands, and waited. He leaned forward. You know why I asked you here? I shook my head. Because chaos creates opportunity. Victor is a child playing with fire. He has already scorched himself, and soon the flames will spread. Clients are nervous. They need someone they trust. You, I swallowed hard, I have a non-compete. If I touch a client, they will bury me. He waved a hand as if brushing away dust. Nonsense. A non-compete cannot prevent a client from making their own choices. If they come to you, you are free. You simply need a home to shelter under until the storm passes. My firm can be that home. You would not be an employee, you would be a consultant, a specialist, technically independent, perfectly legal. I stared at him. I had spent years battling him across tables, watching him exploit every loophole, twist every clause, and now he was offering me one. Why? I asked. Why help me? He smiled, sipping his coffee. Because it helps me too. We win together. You keep your clients. I keep my reputation as the man who saved them from Victor's disaster. The logic was brutal and correct. Still, I hesitated. Trusting Lawrence Hale felt like dancing with a snake, yet part of me could not ignore the lifeline he dangled. As if sensing my conflict, he leaned closer. Think about it, Anna. The clients already call you. They will keep calling you. Will you ignore them, or will you let them burn while Victor hands their billions to Clara? The image hit me hard. Evelyn, trying to explain force majeure to a lawyer who had never read the clause. The other clients fumbling through contracts without guidance. My name attached to years of their trust, now hanging by a thread. I left the cafe without agreeing. But his words followed me into the street, into the cab, into the silence of my apartment. That night the phone buzzed again. This time it was David Kim, CEO of a tech conglomerate worth more than some nations. His voice was sharp, impatient. Anna, tell me this is not true. Tell me you are still handling my acquisition. I closed my eyes. I cannot, David. I am no longer with Reynolds. Then where are you? I had no answer. The line went quiet, then cold. Find a way, he said, and hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand, staring at the black screen. Lawrence was right. The clients were not waiting for permission. They were demanding it. The phone would not stop buzzing. Morning bled into afternoon, and my apartment became a call center without desks or secretaries. I answered only when the names were impossible to ignore. Sarah Rodriguez was the first, her tone sharp with panic. Clara is reviewing our compliance? Anna, this is insanity. If she misses one phrase, we could face regulatory suspension. You know what is at stake. I kept my voice careful. Sarah, I cannot discuss your documents. I am no longer with Reynolds. Then tell me this. Should I trust them? The silence on my end was answer enough. She exhaled, half anger, half resignation. I will wait for you, Anna. Do not make me wait long. She hung up before I could respond. Minutes later, David Kim called, his voice cutting like glass. He reminded me of the acquisition we had built together over 18 months. They tell me you are gone. Is it true? Yes. Then you must tell me where you are now. I had no answer. The line went dead with a click that sounded final, though I knew it was anything but. By evening, another voice joined the chorus. Patricia Hartley, who had trusted me through 2 divorces and a corporate restructuring that nearly bankrupted her empire. Anna, they are children playing with fire. Do not let them burn everything we built. Every conversation was the same melody with different lyrics. Panic, distrust, and the unspoken plea that I step back into a role I no longer officially held. The more I resisted, the clearer it became. They did not want Reynolds & Co. They wanted me. I turned on the television just in time to watch Victor give a press conference. His hair was slick, his tie knotted too tightly, his smile a stiff mask. He promised stability. He promised innovation. Clara stood behind him, pale and silent, her eyes darting like a student called on in class. The market did not believe him. Analysts shredded his words, investors dumped shares, headlines bloomed across the screen. Merger in jeopardy. Key counsel departed abruptly. Leadership crisis at Reynolds & Co., each phrase struck like a drumbeat, steady and damning. I muted the television, but the voices in my head kept going. I had been erased from the company roster in a single stroke, yet outside those walls my absence screamed louder than my presence ever had. The apartment grew darker as night fell. Papers lay scattered across my table, contracts half read, half remembered. I stared at them until the letters blurred. Then my phone lit again. Evelyn Grant. Her voice was iron wrapped in silk. Anna, meet me tomorrow morning. I do not care what your contract says. You will sit with me. I swallowed hard. Evelyn was not a woman to deny. After she hung up, silence returned, thicker than before. I walked to the window and stared out at the city lights. Skyscrapers glowed like constellations, each one a world of decisions and risks. Somewhere in those towers, lawyers like me were still drafting, negotiating, fighting. And I was here, suspended between the past and something not yet named. The non-compete loomed in my mind like a locked gate. Victor would not hesitate to drag me into court if I stepped 1 foot across it. He had money, power, and a family name older than mine, but what he did not have was trust. Trust. That was the word that returned again and again. Trust could not be inherited or bought. It had to be earned one late-night call at a time, one moment of clarity in the middle of chaos. I had earned it, and now I could feel it pulling me forward whether I wanted it or not. Near midnight, I reopened my laptop. The screen glowed across the dim room. My eyes went straight to the folder labeled drafts. It had not moved since I first noticed it. I had not touched it, not dared to, yet its presence throbbed at the edge of my vision like a bruise. I hovered the cursor over it, then pulled away. Not tonight, not yet. But even as I shut the laptop, I knew I could not ignore it forever. Something was waiting inside that folder, something that carried my name without my hand. It would surface eventually, and when it did, everything might change again. I lay in bed, but sleep refused to come. My mind kept circling back to Evelyn, to Lawrence Hale's offer, to the chorus of voices demanding my return. Tomorrow would not be quiet. Tomorrow the path would tilt. And as the city hummed outside my window, I realized I was no longer just a lawyer without a firm. I was the axis on which the fate of Reynolds & Co. turned. The question was not if I would act. The question was when. The cafe Evelyn chose was not the kind where secrets could hide. It was a sharp corner of glass and steel on Madison Avenue, the kind of place where everyone dressed like they belonged in a glossy magazine and every table sat in plain sight of the street. The morning light spilled through the high windows, casting thin golden bars across marble floors. Waiters in crisp uniforms floated between tables with the quiet precision of dancers. I arrived 10 minutes early, though my nerves had already been waiting since dawn. Evelyn Grant was there ahead of me, of course. She was always ahead. She sat at a table by the window, tall and still, a navy suit cut so perfectly it seemed stitched from shadow. Her hair was tied back, revealing a face carved in confidence. In one hand she held a silver pen, twirling it slowly as if even in this cafe she was annotating life itself. She did not wave, did not smile, only lifted her chin slightly when she saw me, a command more than a greeting. I crossed the floor feeling like every eye in the room had turned. Perhaps they had. Sitting across from Evelyn always felt like stepping onto a stage. I slid into the chair opposite, resting my hands on the table to steady them. For a long moment, we said nothing. Around us, the cafe hummed with low conversation, the hiss of steaming milk, the faint clatter of porcelain. Evelyn let the silence stretch, testing me, watching whether I would break first. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "You let me walk into a billion-dollar meeting without counsel." Her words struck harder than a shout. I forced my expression still. "I was not given a choice," I said. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes narrowing. "Victor Reynolds is a fool. But fools only survive when smart people permit it." "Why did you permit it?" The accusation made my throat tight. I kept my voice even, because he is the CEO, because he had security waiting outside my office, because 1 hour was all I was allowed. For the briefest flicker, sympathy brushed her face, then vanished behind steel. She tapped her silver pen against the table once, twice. "My company depends on people who know what they are doing. Right now, my contract is in the hands of a child." Clara, I thought, though Evelyn never said the name. I exhaled slowly. "Clara is not ready." Evelyn's mouth curved, not in humor but in challenge. And you are? Outside the firm, bound by a contract that strangles your every move, her words pierced because they were true. The non-compete was a noose around my neck. One misstep and Victor would tighten it. Yet sitting across from her, I could not admit fear. I chose my reply carefully. I cannot advise you as your lawyer. But as your friend, I can tell you this merger is unstable. Without oversight, it could collapse. She tilted her head, studying me as if I were a witness on the stand. Do you know how many lawyers told me to trust Reynolds & Co.? Dozens. I trusted one. You. The word trust pressed down on me heavier than the marble table. Trust was the currency that had carried me this far, and Evelyn was offering hers again, even after I had been forced to abandon her in that conference room. She leaned closer, her gaze steady. Tell me, Anna, do you want to keep doing this? My pulse stumbled. Yes burned at the back of my throat, but so did the fear of legal fire raining down from Reynolds if I crossed the line. Before I could answer, she sat back, the steel returning. Think carefully, because hesitation is weakness. And weakness has no place in my world. Her words lingered as she reached for her bag, but then she paused. Oh, and one more thing. Lawrence Hale called me last night. The name sliced through me. Hale, of course he had. Evelyn's smile was faint, razor-thin. He says you are considering his offer. I forced my voice steady. I met him for coffee. Nothing more, her smile sharpened. Then coffee is more dangerous than contracts. She stood, her movements precise, heels clicking like punctuation marks across the marble. I will give you 1 week. 7 days to decide if you are content to vanish as a footnote in Reynolds's disaster or if you are willing to stand where you belong. After that, do not bother calling. And with that, she was gone, a shadow slicing through sunlight as she stepped onto Madison Avenue, leaving me with the echo of her ultimatum. I sat in that cafe long after the seat cooled where she had been. My coffee went untouched, the steam fading into nothing. A week. 7 days to choose between silence and war, between the safe darkness of obscurity and the dangerous light of freedom. 7 days before everything tilted beyond repair. I left the cafe with Evelyn's ultimatum still ringing in my ears. The streets of Madison Avenue swallowed me, horns blaring, heels clicking against pavement, voices weaving into the endless rhythm of the city. Yet all of it sounded muted, as if I were trapped under glass. 7 days. A week to decide if I would step back into the fire or vanish for good. I walked without destination, my thoughts a storm. I thought of the conference room, the contracts stacked like towers, the faces of executives who had trusted me for years. I thought of Victor, smirking from behind his phone as if he had solved a problem instead of creating a catastrophe. And I thought of Evelyn, her voice steady and sharp, promising to move on if I hesitated. She had given me trust once. Now she demanded proof that it had not been misplaced. The phone in my hand vibrated. I almost ignored it, but the name on the screen forced me to answer. Lawrence Hale. His tone was warm, but beneath it lay the same precision that had cut me to pieces across countless negotiation tables. Well, Anna, how was your meeting with Evelyn? I clenched my jaw. She told you? He chuckled softly. She told me enough. Enough to know she is furious. Enough to know she wants stability, and you are the only one who can give it to her. He paused, letting the silence work like a scalpel. And enough for me to remind you that Reynolds is crumbling faster than even I imagined. I stopped walking, leaning against a stone building, letting the city rush past me. Why do you care, Lawrence? You have everything to gain from their collapse. Exactly, he said smoothly. But I have even more to gain if I rebuild what Victor is destroying. And I cannot do that without you. I wanted to laugh, but it came out hollow. You do not need me. You never have. That is where you are wrong. His voice sharpened. You know their systems, their weaknesses, their clients better than anyone. And the clients, they already trust you. They are calling you, are they not? The question sliced too close to the truth. I did not answer, and my silence was answer enough. He pressed on. Here is the offer. You will not be my employee. You will be an independent consultant operating under Hale and Carter. A shield, perfectly legal, perfectly defensible. Victor cannot touch you. Clients will come because they already believe in you. We win together. I closed my eyes, memories flooding back. Years of facing him across tables, watching him dismantle arguments with a smile. He thrived on loopholes, on bending the rules until they broke in his hands. Could I trust him now, or was this another trap disguised as partnership? That night, the calls multiplied. Patricia Hartley again, her voice cracking with anger. Anna, I cannot let them handle this. Not after everything we built. Please. Then David Kim, short and cold. Find a way, Anna. Do not leave me with amateurs. Even Sarah Rodriguez left a voicemail, her usual confidence stripped away. Anna, we are sinking. I know you cannot speak, but please just call me back. Each message landed heavier than the last. I told myself to ignore them to let the storm pass, but the truth was impossible to deny. These people had trusted me for years, not Reynolds, not Victor, me. I turned on the television out of desperation, searching for distraction. Instead, I found Victor grinning stiffly at a press conference, promising stability, promising innovation, promising anything he thought investors wanted to hear. Clara stood behind him, pale, silent, clutching a binder she clearly did not understand. Markets tumbled anyway. Headlines scrolled across the screen. Merger in jeopardy. Clients flee Reynolds. CEO under fire. Each word felt like both vindication and accusation. I muted the television and stared at the dark reflection of my own face. I had been erased from their company, yet somehow my absence roared louder than my presence ever had. Near midnight, I returned to the table. Papers littered the surface, contracts I had once mastered now lying in fragments. My laptop glowed, patient and waiting. Against every promise I had made to myself, I clicked the drafts folder. The file sat there unchanged, the same unsigned contract dated last month, the same metadata bearing my name. My pulse pounded as I opened it. The language was crude, unfinished, but buried within it was something unmistakable. A clause I recognized instantly because I had fought against it years ago. A clause Lawrence Hale himself had once slipped into a hostile takeover deal, word for word. My breath froze. Why was it here? Why was it attached to my name? I scrolled faster, scanning for answers, but the text blurred. Was someone framing me, planting evidence? Or was Hale testing me, leaving a breadcrumb trail only I would notice? I slammed the laptop shut, my chest tight. For a long moment I sat in silence, listening to the distant hum of the city outside. Then the phone buzzed again. Lawrence's voice spilled through the speaker, smooth as silk. Think of this as destiny, Anna. You are not walking away. You are walking toward who you were meant to be. I stared at the closed laptop, the folder still burning in my mind. Destiny, he called it, but it felt more like a snare tightening around my ankles. 7 days, Evelyn had said. 7 days to decide. But already the walls were closing in, already the lines between choice and inevitability were blurring. And in the middle of it all sat that file, silent, waiting, carrying my name like a brand I had never carved. I did not know what it meant yet. But I knew this much. Whatever was hidden in that folder would not stay hidden forever. And when it came to light, it would change everything. The first time I walked into the offices of Hale and Carter, I felt a dissonance I could not name. The lobby was sleek but understated, marble floors polished without gleam, brass lamps casting pools of warm light. It lacked the cold grandeur of Reynolds & Co., but there was something sharper in the air, something alive. The receptionist greeted me by name before I spoke. My presence had been anticipated, arranged, perhaps even orchestrated. Lawrence appeared almost instantly, his stride confident, his smile calibrated. "Welcome home, Anna," he said, though the words struck me as both promise and threat. "This is not my home," I reminded him. He only laughed softly, ushering me toward a glass-walled conference room. Inside, a folder already lay waiting on the table. He gestured as though unveiling a gift. 3 clients have reached out this morning alone. They asked for you by name. We can formalize your role today. Independent consultant. You keep your autonomy and I keep the satisfaction of knowing Victor is choking on his own arrogance. I did not touch the folder. What if Victor sues? Then let him, Lawrence replied smoothly. The courts will see that clients sought you. You did not solicit them. And besides, he cannot afford that battle while his empire collapses. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. The timing is perfect, Anna. You were thrown out of his world, but here you can build one of your own. His words hooked into me despite my resistance. I thought of Evelyn's demand, of David Kim's clipped tone, of Sarah's voice laced with panic. Could I abandon them because of Victor's legal games? Or was stepping forward the only way to honor the trust they had placed in me? I opened the folder. Inside were outlines of agreements, consulting structures, compensation models, confidentiality clauses. Everything designed to shield me while maximizing my reach. Hale had thought of every angle, too perfectly. I looked up sharply. You planned this. He did not deny it. Opportunity favors the prepared. For the rest of the morning, I sat in that glass room with documents spread around me, the hum of the firm outside, my reflection caught in the pane as if questioning itself. By the time I left, I had not signed anything, but the path had shifted beneath my feet. That evening, Evelyn called again. I hear you visited Hale, she said flatly. He invited me, I replied. And you went. I stayed silent. Her voice softened slightly. Anna, I do not care where you sit so long as you stand with me, but make no mistake. If you hesitate, I will not wait. The line clicked dead. Sleep again abandoned me that night. I replayed every word, every glance, every clause I had read. My laptop glowed on the table, the drafts folder still lurking like a secret I was not ready to face. Instead, I drowned myself in work, sketching scenarios, drafting fallback plans, preparing for a war I told myself I had not yet chosen. 2 days later, the first client walked through the doors of Hale and Carter asking for me. Not for the firm, for me. His name was Robert Lang, head of a logistics empire with ships in every ocean. He clasped my hand tightly, relief plain in his face. Thank God you are here. I will not deal with Reynolds without you. I guided him into the same glass-walled room. As he spoke of contracts and chaos, I realized something had shifted irreversibly. The clients were voting with their feet, and every step carried them closer to me. That night, the headlines screamed louder. Grant Holdings pauses merger. Board of Reynolds divided. CEO under siege. I watched Victor's face on the screen, his smile cracking, his words stumbling. Clara sat beside him, eyes wide, hands trembling against her notes. The empire was rotting from the top down, and I no longer felt pity, only inevitability. But inevitability came with its own chains. With every client who turned to me, the choice grew less like a decision and more like destiny. And somewhere in the glow of the laptop screen, the folder named drafts pulsed silently, as if waiting for me to accept the path already laid. Robert Lang was only the beginning. Within days, the conference room at Hale and Carter became a revolving door of familiar faces. Executives I had guided through storms, CEOs whose signatures I had watched tremble on the edge of billion-dollar deals, board members who once swore loyalty to Reynolds but now walked straight past their marble lobby to find me here. They came carrying files, questions, and above all fear. They were not loyal to firms or legacies. They were loyal to results, and results were what they believed I delivered. Every handshake felt heavier, every signature underlined the truth Evelyn had already spoken. Trust was the only currency that mattered, and my account was overflowing. One evening, Sarah Rodriguez arrived unannounced. She looked exhausted, dark circles beneath eyes that once radiated command. She dropped a stack of papers on the table. Anna, they assigned Clara to review these. If she files them without correction, we face millions in penalties. I scanned the first few pages and nearly swore aloud. Errors glared like flashing beacons. Entire sections were misinterpreted, clauses twisted into nonsense. I looked up to find Sarah watching me, hope and desperation colliding in her gaze. "Can you fix this?" she asked quietly. The non-compete screamed in the back of my mind, warning me of Victor's wrath. But the professional in me, the part that had built her name on solving impossible knots, could not let it go. I nodded once. "Leave them with me." She exhaled, shoulders sagging. "I knew you would not abandon us." When she left, I sat alone with the papers, the weight of them crushing. By helping her, I had crossed an invisible line. There was no turning back now. News outlets fed the fire daily. Board members clash with Victor Reynolds. Major clients walk away. Unlicensed assistant mishandles contracts. Clara's name even appeared once, though buried deep in an article that tried to soften the disaster. I wondered if she read it, if she realized she was nothing more than a pawn in Victor's crumbling game. Victor himself appeared on television again, his voice brittle, his eyes darting nervously as he recited promises he could not keep. I studied his face and felt only detachment. He had tried to erase me, but it was his name dissolving into ridicule while mine grew louder in hushed conversations. Hale thrived in the chaos. He moved through the office like a conductor guiding an orchestra, arranging meetings, smoothing introductions, placing me exactly where clients needed reassurance. Yet every gesture carried the subtle weight of ownership, as though he believed he had already claimed me. One night, after a 14-hour day of back-to-back consultations, I found him waiting in the hallway. He offered me a glass of scotch, his smile easy. "You were brilliant today, Anna. Half the city is whispering your name." I took the glass but did not drink. Whispering is dangerous. Whispering, he corrected, is power, and power is finally where it belongs, with you. He raised his glass in a mock toast. "To the beginning." I stared at the amber liquid, the reflection of the overhead lights trembling within it. "To the beginning," I echoed, though inside me the words rang hollow, because beginnings demanded endings. And I could feel the end of something closing in. At home, exhaustion pressed on me like lead. My table was buried under drafts and notes, my phone buzzing endlessly with new requests. In the corner of the screen, the drafts folder remained untouched but relentless. I avoided it the way one avoids a shadow in the hallway, knowing it is there even when refusing to look. But even without opening it, I could feel its presence guiding me, mocking me. That contract with Hale's fingerprints, it had not been an accident. Someone had planted it, and sooner or later the truth of who and why would demand its price. Still, there was no time to unravel mysteries. Clients arrived in droves, pulling me further into Hale's orbit. Every decision, every correction, every whispered reassurance tied me deeper to him and further from Reynolds, and with each passing day, the notion of walking away became laughable. By the end of the week, Evelyn called again. Her tone was softer this time, though no less commanding. "You see now, don't you? This was never about firms. It was about who we trust with our lives. You have always been that person." I closed my eyes, fatigue dragging at me. "Evelyn, this path, it could end in court. Then we will fight," she said simply. "But better a fight with you at my side than surrender under Victor's incompetence." When the call ended, I sat staring at the dark screen of my phone. The choice was no longer mine. It had been made the moment Sarah dropped those papers on my desk, the moment Robert Lang walked past Reynolds's marble lobby, the moment Evelyn refused to wait. There was no going back. As I shut down the laptop for the night, the drafts folder pulsed faintly on the screen, its presence impossible to ignore. My name sat on a document I had not written, carrying words that belonged to someone else. I knew it would return, that it would demand explanation. But not tonight. Tonight, I surrendered to exhaustion, knowing tomorrow would bring more clients, more pressure, more whispers that were no longer whispers at all. I had chosen my side, whether I admitted it aloud or not. And with that choice came both power and peril, twined together like two edges of the same blade. The letter arrived on a Monday morning, slid under my apartment door in an envelope so heavy it seemed to carry more than paper. I recognized the firm's insignia before I touched it, Reynolds & Co.'s outside counsel, a name etched in gold across decades of courtroom victories. My hands trembled as I unfolded the pages, but the words were clear enough. A cease and desist. The language was familiar, cold, and merciless. "You are in violation of your non-compete. You are unlawfully interfering with client relationships. You will desist immediately or face litigation." They did not bother to soften the blow. The penalty clause alone could strip me bare, drag me through years of trials, stain my name until nothing remained but dust. I read it 3 times, the words hammering louder each time, before dropping it on the table. My phone vibrated instantly, as if synced with my dread. A news alert. Former Reynolds counsel breaches contract, faces legal action. I clicked the link with numb fingers. My face filled the screen beside Victor's, the headline screaming betrayal. The article painted me as reckless, greedy, abandoning my oath to pursue personal power. They even quoted unnamed sources suggesting I had been planning this betrayal for months. I nearly laughed from the bitterness of it. They had erased me from the company roster in an hour, but now I was too dangerous to ignore. By the time I arrived at Hale and Carter, the storm had already reached full force. Assistants whispered in corners, phones rang with urgency, the air electric with rumor. Lawrence met me at the elevator, holding a copy of the same letter. His expression was calm, almost amused. "Congratulations, Anna, you have officially frightened them." "This is not a game," I snapped. "They will drag me through court until I have nothing left." He walked me toward the glass conference room, speaking low. "Litigation is smoke and mirrors. They cannot afford discovery right now. Their books are riddled with cracks. This letter is a bluff to scare you into silence. And what if it is not? Then we fight." His smile sharpened, and I have never lost a fight I chose. Inside the conference room, the table was already stacked with clippings. Headlines from 6 outlets, each echoing the same story: breach of trust, renegade lawyer. Every paragraph twisted the truth until even I began to question myself. Evelyn arrived that afternoon, striding past reception like she owned the place. She threw a copy of the paper on the table, the ink smudged from her grip. "Do you see this filth?" she demanded. "They are terrified, which means they are weak." Her fury was electric, but it did not calm me. I pointed at the cease and desist still lying open. "Weak or not, they can still ruin me." She leaned across the table, her voice dropping. "Anna, I have watched men like Victor my entire career. They bark, they threaten, they write letters in gold ink. But when the real work begins, they hide. Trust me, he is bluffing." I wanted to believe her. But even as I nodded, my stomach clenched tighter. That night, alone in my apartment, the fear finally caught me. I paced the floor, the cease and desist crumpled in my hand. My phone buzzed endlessly with alerts, reporters hungry for a quote. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my laptop. The drafts folder pulsed in the corner of the screen, silent and insistent. I told myself not to click, not tonight, not when the walls were already closing in. But my hand hovered anyway. One accidental touch, and the document opened again. The same clumsy contract, the same strange language. Yet now a new addition sat at the bottom, an arbitration clause referencing Reynolds and Co. directly. A clause written in the same style I had once used years ago, but I had not written this one. Cold spread through me. Whoever was planting these drafts knew my history, my patterns. They were not framing me randomly. They were building something deliberate. The phone buzzed again, Lawrence's voice calm, steady. "Ignore the noise, Anna. This is the price of power. And you are strong enough to pay it." I closed the laptop, but the echo of his words lingered. Strong enough, perhaps, but at what cost? The storm did not ease with the letter. It only grew. By midweek, my phone was no longer a lifeline but a weapon aimed at me. Dozens of calls each day, each one carrying the same urgent demand. Fix this, guide us, save us. Clients who once cloaked their requests in politeness now barked their fears directly into my ear. David Kim cornered me first. He arrived unannounced at Hale and Carter, his usual composure gone. He tossed a folder onto the table so hard the papers scattered. "Victor's team is incompetent. This merger will collapse in weeks without you." I gathered the pages, skimming numbers that painted disaster. My mouth went dry. David leaned in, his voice low but sharp. "If you walk away now, Anna, you do not just lose us. You lose every ounce of trust you built over the last decade." Before I could respond, Sarah Rodriguez swept in, her phone still pressed to her ear. She ended her call only long enough to snap, "Anna, the regulators are circling. Clara submitted filings riddled with errors. We need you to draft corrections before they audit." I glanced at Lawrence across the table. He only folded his arms, watching silently as the tide pulled me deeper. One by one, more arrived. Executives with pale faces, advisors carrying binders like shields. Each one repeated the same refrain: "Reynolds is failing, and only you can steady the ground beneath us." By the end of the day, exhaustion clung to me like smoke. I stepped into the hallway, pressing my back to the wall. My head spun, my chest tight. I was one woman, yet somehow carrying the weight of collapsing empires. Lawrence appeared beside me, his voice soft, almost kind. "This is what they never understood at Reynolds. You are the axis. Without you, they fall. With you, they rise." I turned on him, anger sparking. "And what about the cease and desist, the lawsuits? Am I supposed to ignore the fact that Victor is sharpening knives?" He smiled faintly. "Let him swing. You will not fall because you are not alone anymore. You have me." The way he said it, so calm, so certain, sent a chill through me. Was it reassurance or possession? That night, the press grew louder. Articles dissected my every move, debating whether I was a savior or a saboteur. One headline seared into me: "Anna Weston, genius or betrayer?" My face stared back from the screen, half halo, half shadow. I turned off the television, but the words etched themselves into my thoughts. Genius or betrayer, savior or criminal, there was no middle ground anymore. Evelyn called past midnight. Her voice was steady, though I could hear the strain beneath it. "They will try to break you, Anna, but they cannot, not if you stand firm. You are the only reason I have not pulled out completely." "Do you understand that?" I closed my eyes, pressing the phone to my ear. "I understand." After she hung up, I sat alone in the dark. Papers covered my table, my laptop glowing faintly, the drafts folder lurking like a secret waiting to burst open. My body begged for rest, but my mind raced. I opened the latest filings Sarah had left with me. Errors screamed from every line. Fixing them would take hours, maybe days, but letting them pass would doom everything. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, torn between fear of Victor's lawyers and fear of betraying the clients who still believed in me. In the end, I began typing. Clause by clause, correction by correction, I worked until dawn painted the sky pale gray. By the time I stopped, the documents shone with clarity, rebuilt line by line until they no longer resembled Clara's disaster. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. Somewhere deep inside, I knew the truth. I had crossed the line Victor drew. I was no longer merely accused of breaking the non-compete. I had broken it, and there was no turning back. The lawsuits came faster than I expected. Not a full case, not yet, but filings leaked to the press like blood into water. Reynolds and Co. claimed I had stolen clients, that I had orchestrated a mass defection. They spoke of irreparable harm, of deliberate sabotage. Each phrase carried weight, and the media devoured every word. One morning, I opened the paper to find my name sprawled across the front page: Reynolds victim of hostile poaching. Below, a photo of me leaving Hale and Carter, head bent, hair loose around my shoulders. The image made me look guilty even before a judge had spoken. I wanted to disappear, to bury myself in silence. But silence was no longer an option. Clients filled the glass conference room each day, their voices frantic. Some feared lawsuits, others feared collapse, but all of them pressed the same message. Stay with us, Anna. Do not let them win. Evelyn was the loudest among them. She strode into the room one afternoon with fire in her eyes, ignoring the assistants who tried to stop her. She planted herself at the head of the table and spoke as if delivering a verdict. Enough of this cowardice. Reynolds is bluffing. If they had proof, they would already be in court. Anna is the only reason any of us still have ground to stand on. If they want war, then we stand with her. Her words electrified the room. Heads nodded, voices rose. For the first time, I saw unity in the chaos. It was a dangerous unity, but it was mine. Still, doubt not at me. When the meeting ended, I stayed behind, gathering stray papers. My hands shook as I stacked them. Evelyn caught my eye. You are stronger than you think, she said softly. Do not let them scare you. Her confidence was a torch in the dark, but the flame wavered against the storm raging inside me. That night, I returned home drained. I collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling, my body heavy as stone. Yet the glow of the laptop pulled me back, insistent, relentless. The drafts folder waited. I told myself not to open it, not tonight, not when I needed sleep more than answers. But exhaustion loosened my resolve, and with a trembling hand, I clicked. The same contract filled the screen, but different now. The arbitration clause I had noticed earlier was expanded, detailed with alarming precision. It referenced specific clients by name, including Evelyn Grant and Robert Lang. Language only I should have known, yet I had never typed a word of it. My stomach twisted. Whoever was behind this had access not only to my style, but to confidential client details. That meant one of two things. Someone inside Reynolds was framing me, or someone inside Hale and Carter was feeding the fire. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart racing. The phone buzzed. Evelyn again. Her voice was calmer now, but edged with steel. Tomorrow we make this public. If Reynolds wants to smear you, then we stand in the light together. I will speak your name. Others will follow. I froze. Public meant no more shadows, no more room to maneuver quietly. It meant Victor would unleash everything he had, but it also meant protection. If Evelyn and others stood with me openly, Reynolds could not frame me as a lone renegade. After the call ended, I sat in the dark, torn between terror and resolve. The drafts folder lingered in my mind like a phantom whisper, warning me that the real trap had not yet sprung. But I knew tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow I would step into the light, for better or worse. The auditorium smelled faintly of fresh paint and fear. It had been rented in haste, rows of seats filled with reporters, investors, and clients desperate for clarity. Flashbulbs popped as Evelyn strode onto the stage, her heels clicking like a gavel striking wood. She did not pause, did not glance around, simply raised a hand for silence. I followed her, my pulse thundering, palms slick against the smooth paper of the notes I would not use. The lights blinded, the cameras tracked, and for the first time I felt the weight of the world's gaze settle directly on me. Evelyn began. Reynolds & Co. has chosen to spread lies rather than face their failures. She gestured toward me. I trusted Anna Weston then, and I trust her now. Without her, our work would have crumbled years ago. She is not a traitor. She is the reason we are still standing. Applause erupted from the clients scattered across the front rows. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras whirring. The air crackled with the shift of momentum. Then Victor Reynolds walked in. He came flanked by lawyers, his suit immaculate, his smile brittle. He moved down the aisle like a man walking into court, head high though the ground beneath him shook. When he reached the front, he spoke without waiting for permission. Do not be deceived. This woman violated her oath, her contract, her duty. Reynolds & Co. has thrived for a century, and no single individual will tear it down for personal gain. Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras turned to me hungry. I stepped forward, my voice trembling at first but steadying as it carried. I did not betray anyone. I was cast out because I refused to be silent in the face of incompetence. Clients came to me because they could not trust you. That is not betrayal, Victor. That is survival. The words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. Evelyn's eyes burned with pride. Victor's jaw tightened, his smile cracking under the lights. Reporters shouted questions. Who was lying? Who had proof? The noise swelled until the moderator called for order. But the balance had shifted. I felt it in the way the audience leaned forward, in the way Evelyn's hand brushed my shoulder in quiet solidarity. When the conference ended, headlines exploded across every outlet. Weston defies Reynolds. Clients rally behind Anna. Trust versus tradition. The narrative was no longer his to control. That night, back in my apartment, exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. I collapsed into the chair, staring at the laptop still glowing faintly. The drafts folder waited. I told myself not tonight. Not after this day, not after standing in the fire and surviving, but curiosity and dread tangled until resistance broke. I clicked. The document had changed again. This time it bore more than clauses. It carried an entire strategy: letters of intent, escape routes for clients, arbitration paths lined with technical traps. And at the bottom, a signature block. My name. I had not written a word, yet the strokes looked like mine. The metadata showed yesterday's date, hours after I had left the office, while I stood on stage facing Victor. My breath came short. Someone was not just copying my style. Someone was forging me. The realization settled like ice in my veins. Whoever held the pen behind these drafts had power enough to mimic me, to plant documents that could destroy me if revealed. The victory on stage now felt fragile, almost hollow. The real war was not in courtrooms or auditoriums. It was hidden here, in the shadows of my own name. And as I closed the laptop, a single thought rang clear: the worst was still coming. The morning after the conference felt unreal. Headlines sang my name as if I had pulled the city back from the brink with nothing but words. Weston triumphs over Reynolds. Clients applaud Anna's courage. Trust redefined. I scrolled through them with a numb detachment, the glow of victory dulled by the weight pressing on my chest. At Hale and Carter, assistants greeted me with admiration that felt rehearsed. Lawrence shook my hand firmly, his smile carved into confidence. You see, Anna, they are already rewriting the narrative. Today you are not a villain. You are a savior. His words should have lifted me, but instead they settled like chains. A savior for whom? For Evelyn, for the clients, perhaps for the firm now hosting me. But for myself, I was less certain. Clients swarmed in, each one eager to align themselves with the new current. Contracts slid across tables, pens scratched signatures, promises hung heavy in the air. I should have felt powerful, yet beneath it all was a gnawing sense of being carried along rather than steering. That night, exhaustion wrapped around me like a cloak. I returned home, kicked off my heels, and sank into the chair by the table. The laptop waited, its glow pulsing faintly. The drafts folder sat where it always had, silent yet insistent. I tried to resist. I told myself I would not open it, that I would not feed the paranoia clawing at me. But curiosity gnawed sharper than fear. The document had changed again. This time it was more polished, no longer clumsy. It outlined a full restructuring plan for Evelyn's merger, down to the smallest clause. Notes littered the margins, legal shorthand only an insider would know. My shorthand, but I had never typed a word. The breath caught in my throat. My hand shook as I scrolled, recognizing fragments of arguments I had once used in battles years ago, phrases I had spoken, not written. How could they appear here, as if lifted straight from memory? I checked the metadata. The file claimed it had been created 2 nights ago, while I was asleep, while my laptop was closed. The author still listed me. Panic surged. I shut the laptop, heart racing, the room spinning. Whoever was behind this was not simply imitating me. They were inside my world, my words, my history. Someone was crafting a mirror so perfect that even I struggled to tell the reflection from reality. The phone rang. Evelyn's voice filled the silence, steady and grounding. You were magnificent yesterday. Victor looked like a man drowning. I swallowed, forcing my voice even. Thank you. She paused, as if sensing the tremor beneath the words. Be careful, Anna. Triumph makes you visible and visibility makes you vulnerable. After we hung up, I sat staring at the dark window, the city lights flickering like watchful eyes. Evelyn was right. Visibility was both shield and target. The next morning, the storm shifted. An article surfaced online, quoting anonymous sources claiming I had been drafting contracts illegally long before my departure from Reynolds. It cited evidence of files carrying my signature. The screenshot attached looked chillingly familiar: my name, my style, a fragment of the very drafts I had seen on my laptop. My stomach dropped. Someone was not just creating false documents, they were leaking them. I rushed to Hale and Carter, slamming the paper onto Lawrence's desk. Look at this. They are using fake drafts to frame me. He examined it calmly, lips curving into a faint smile. Do not panic, this is desperation. Victor is throwing mud, hoping it sticks. But how do they have this? I demanded. These are not Reynolds' files. They came from. I stopped myself. His eyes were too steady, his expression too smooth. From where, Anna? He asked softly. I shook my head. Nowhere, just nowhere. He leaned back, folding his hands. Do not let them rattle you. The more they scream, the more you know you are winning. I left his office unsettled. His calm felt rehearsed, too precise, as if he had expected me to bring him that article. That night, alone again, I reopened the drafts folder. A new file sat inside, time-stamped hours earlier. My pulse thundered as I clicked. It was a letter of resignation addressed to Reynolds & Co., signed with my name. I had never written it. The forged resignation letter glared back at me from the laptop screen. Every line mimicked my voice, my phrasing, my habits. The strokes of the signature were uncannily close, as if my hand had signed it in some forgotten moment. My throat tightened. If this letter found its way into the press or the courts, it would not just stain my name, it would destroy everything. Sleep was impossible. I tossed, I paced, I pressed my palms against the cold glass of the window until dawn crept across the skyline. By morning, I had resolved to confront the only person who could have orchestrated this. At Hale & Carter, the corridors still hummed with the hush of early hours. Most offices were dark, but a faint light spilled through Lawrence Hale's door. The sight pulled me forward against every warning in my body. His desk lamp glowed over neat stacks of papers. For a moment I thought I had time, that I could sift through the evidence alone. I stepped inside quietly, each footfall a betrayal of my own restraint. My eyes scanned the top sheet and froze. It was my shorthand. Not mine exactly, but a perfect echo, curved in the same strokes I had scribbled in margins for years. Clauses annotated, corrections written in the very rhythm of my thoughts, but the page bore his handwriting. I turned another, then another. There were copies of the drafts I had found on my laptop, the arbitration clause, the restructuring plan, even the forged resignation letter. Each one bore traces of me but was undeniably born from him. My stomach twisted violently. The room swayed. "You should not be here, Anna," I spun. Lawrence stood at the doorway, tie loose, expression unreadable. He did not shout, did not startle. His voice was almost gentle, like a professor catching a student in forbidden archives. "It was you," I whispered. "All this time it was you." He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. "Do not look so betrayed. You knew I was a strategist. Did you really think your rise was pure chance? You planted files on my laptop. You forged my name." He tilted his head, studying me as if weighing how much truth I could carry. "I ensured survival. Reynolds was sinking, and you would have gone down with them out of misplaced loyalty. I gave you the push you needed." I felt my pulse hammering, my nails biting into my palm. "A push? You set me up to take the fall. Or to rise," he countered smoothly. "Look around. Evelyn trusts you. Clients worship you. Reporters sing your name. Do you think any of that would have happened if I had let you wallow in silence?" I shook my head, struggling to breathe. "You manipulated me. You controlled every step." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that had unnerved me in countless negotiations. "I guided you. You were always the axis, Anna, but even an axis needs a lever." My hands shook with fury. "And when the time comes, will you protect me or feed me to the fire?" His eyes glittered, calm and calculating. "That depends on whether you stand with me." The words slithered into the air, heavy and poisonous. I dropped the papers onto his desk, the sound sharp in the quiet office, then walked out without another glance. The hallway blurred as I stormed through, heels striking like gunshots. I felt raw, hollow, furious all at once. He had betrayed me, yes, but worse, he had rewritten me. Turned my voice into his weapon. Back in my apartment, I collapsed into the chair, the city lights blinking like indifferent stars. My laptop glowed, patient, waiting. The drafts folder pulsed at the corner of the screen. My hand hovered before I clicked. Inside, the resignation letter remained, but now, beneath the forged signature, new words had appeared in smaller print, prepared in partnership with Hale & Carter. My breath caught. He was no longer hiding. He had branded me with his firm, binding us together whether I wanted it or not. I slammed the laptop shut, but the phrase burned in my mind. Prepared in partnership. A trap disguised as alliance, chains dressed as opportunity. For the first time, I understood the depth of the game. Victor was not the greatest danger. Lawrence was. And as the night pressed in around me, I realized silence was no longer an option. The next move had to be mine. The words "prepared in partnership with Hale & Carter" haunted me through the night. They echoed each time I closed my eyes, replayed in every shadow along the ceiling. I had thought Victor was the great threat, the storm that would crush me if I faltered. But Lawrence, he was different. His betrayal was silent, deliberate, and intimate. He knew my habits, my flaws, my vulnerabilities, and he had sculpted them into weapons. Yet as the city stirred to life beneath my window, I knew I could not run. If I disappeared, the narrative would belong to him and to Victor. The clients would scatter, Evelyn's faith would shatter, and I would be nothing but a whisper of scandal. I had to stay. I had to fight, but on my own terms. That morning, I walked into Hale and Carter with a mask so perfect even I almost believed it. I shook hands with assistants, answered questions in a steady tone, and let Lawrence greet me with his polished smile. He searched my face for cracks, perhaps, but I gave him none. If he suspected I knew, he did not show it. We sat together in the glass-walled room as clients streamed in. They brought contracts, urgent memos, whispered fears. Evelyn arrived last, striking as ever in a tailored navy suit, her presence turning the room electric. She praised me openly, calling me the anchor of the entire operation. Her words drew nods from every corner, and I forced myself to accept the applause without flinching. But each time I met Lawrence's eyes, I felt the weight of the forged drafts pressing between us. He leaned forward during a lull, his voice smooth. "You see, Anna, this is what we built together. Do not let doubts cloud the reality. Together." The word tasted like poison. I nodded as if agreeing, but inside I mapped the battlefield. That evening, when the office emptied, I returned quietly to my apartment. I locked the door, pulled the curtains tight, and opened the laptop again. The drafts folder pulsed at the corner of the screen. I clicked it with steady hands. New files had appeared. They were sharper than before, flawless imitations of my style. One contained a memo to regulators, dated weeks earlier, accusing Reynolds of fraud and signed with my name. Another was a contract with Evelyn's company, altered to suggest I had taken money under the table. Each file was timestamped perfectly, each one a noose waiting to tighten. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. These were not random forgeries. They were part of a pattern, a careful scaffolding of lies. Lawrence was not merely ensuring my rise, he was building leverage. At any moment, he could reveal these drafts and cast me as the villain he had rescued. I printed copies, slid them into a folder, and hid them in the back of my closet. Evidence, yes, but dangerous. If discovered, they could damn me as easily as him. Over the next week, I lived in dual worlds. By day, I stood beside Evelyn and Lawrence, guiding clients through crisis after crisis. We met regulators, soothed investors, and repaired contracts torn by Reynolds' incompetence. Each victory strengthened my image, each headline cemented my role. Evelyn trusted me so fully she began speaking of new ventures, new horizons, with me at the helm. By night, I scoured every trace of the drafts. I checked metadata, tracked network activity, searched for hidden signatures. I found fragments, IP addresses pointing back to Hale and Carter servers, timestamps matching Lawrence's late-night sessions. It was enough to convince me, but not enough to convict him. Victor's shadow loomed larger too. His lawyers escalated, filing motions and leaking to the press. One morning, the headlines screamed, "Reynolds presents proof of Weston's secret drafts." They displayed blurred images of documents suspiciously close to those in my hidden folder. My stomach lurched. Hale was moving his pieces, feeding Victor just enough to build the illusion while keeping the real knife at his side. I met Lawrence's gaze that afternoon across the boardroom table. His eyes were calm, confident, as if daring me to speak. Instead, I smiled thinly and carried on. But in my chest, the plan had begun to form. I would not confront him directly. Not yet. If he believed me compliant, I could watch him longer, gather more, wait for the moment when his arrogance exposed him. Evelyn called me late one night, her voice warm despite the storm outside. "Anna, I want you to know I trust you more than anyone in this business. If Reynolds or anyone else tries to drag you down, they will have to go through me first." Her words nearly broke me. I wanted to tell her the truth, to confess the trap tightening around me, but I swallowed it back. If I told her now, she might confront Lawrence openly, and everything would collapse before I was ready. So I said only, "Thank you." That means more than you know. When the call ended, I sat staring at the glowing screen. The drafts folder pulsed again, patient, alive. I did not open it. Not tonight. Tonight, silence was my strategy. For the first time in weeks, I felt not only fear but a spark of control. Lawrence thought he held the strings. Let him believe it. For now, because the moment would come when I would cut them. The days passed in a haze of conferences, legal drafts, and relentless pressure from clients who clung to me as if I were the last handhold on a cliff. Outwardly, I played my part perfectly. The steady counsel, the strategist who could navigate storms, the woman who had stood against Reynolds and lived to tell it. Inside, though, I carried a secret weight. Every smile I gave Lawrence, every nod of agreement in the boardroom, was a mask stretched tight across suspicion. I had proof now that he was forging drafts, shaping my voice into lies, but I needed more. One photograph was not enough to take him down without taking myself with him, so I waited and I watched. It was nearly midnight when chance delivered me another opening. I had stayed late, combing through Evelyn's latest merger documents, when I realized I had left a binder in the conference room. The building was quiet, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound. As I crossed the hall, I noticed a faint glow spilling from Lawrence's office. I hesitated, my chest tightened. Curiosity and fear waged war in me. Finally, I moved closer, silent on the carpet. Through the narrow crack of the door, I saw him at his desk, leaning back, eyes closed as though resting after a long day. The printer behind him whirred, feeding out page after page. When his phone buzzed, he stood, stretching lazily before stepping out. The door swung nearly shut behind him. My pulse hammered. I pushed it open and slipped inside. The printer tray was warm beneath my fingers. A fresh page lay on top, black ink still drying. My eyes scanned the words and froze. Confidential Weston Draft, the title mocked me, bold and undeniable. But what nearly buckled my knees was the date printed at the bottom. It placed the draft weeks before my expulsion from Reynolds, weeks before the night I had discovered the first forged document on my laptop. My throat went dry. Lawrence wasn't just building new forgeries. He was rewriting the past, creating a paper trail that painted me as a traitor long before I had walked out of Reynolds' doors. I rifled through the stack, each page worse than the last. Contracts suggesting I had taken payments under the table. Memos accusing Reynolds executives of fraud, signed with my name. Confidential notes addressed to regulators, all dated to months I could prove I was still chained to Reynolds' desk. Panic surged hot in my veins. If these documents reached court, no jury would doubt them. They were too polished, too precise. And my name sat at the bottom of every one. I forced myself to breathe, to look closer. That was when I found it, a detail small enough he must have thought no one would notice. In the properties panel of one file, buried in the metadata, was the login ID of the system that had produced it. Not mine, not Reynolds, Hale and Carter, and not just the firm, but Lawrence himself. His personal ID embedded like a fingerprint. My hands shook as I snapped photo after photo, capturing every damning line. Each click of the phone camera felt like a thunderclap in the silence. Footsteps echoed down the hall. I shoved the pages back into the tray, closed the properties panel, and slipped out the side door just as Lawrence returned. My breath came ragged, but he never saw me. Back in my apartment, I locked the door and dropped into my chair. The evidence glowed from my phone, stark and undeniable. For the first time in weeks, fear and fury gave way to something sharper, power. He thought he had me bound, that he could forge me into his puppet and pull the strings whenever he wished. But he had made a mistake. A small one, perhaps, but enough. Cracks, I knew, were where entire walls began to crumble. The next morning, the boardroom hummed with energy. Clients shuffled papers, Evelyn held court with her usual grace, and Lawrence sat at the head of the table as though nothing in the world could touch him. I entered with a smile steady enough to fool them all. Evelyn greeted me warmly, her hand on my shoulder. "We are ready for the next phase, Anna. With you here, nothing can stop us." I nodded, my eyes flicking briefly to Lawrence. His gaze met mine, calm and polished as always. To him, I was still under his thumb. But in my pocket, my phone buzzed faintly against my palm, carrying the photos that told a different story. For the first time in weeks, I felt the balance tilt. Not fully, not yet, but enough to remind me I was not powerless. I sat, opened the binder, and played my part. Outwardly, the same loyal partner. Inwardly, a strategist biding time, because I had seen the truth in black and white, stamped with his own ID. Lawrence Hale believed he was the puppeteer, but I now held the thread that could unravel him. And when the right moment came, I would not hesitate to pull. The storm broke on a Thursday morning. News outlets erupted with headlines, plastered across every screen in the city. Exclusive, secret drafts expose Weston's betrayal. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee untouched, the paper trembling in my hand. The pages showed documents stamped with my name, contracts dated months before I had left Reynolds. Exactly the trail Hale had been weaving in the shadows. On cue, Victor appeared on every channel, his voice sharp, his smile triumphant. At last, the truth. Weston schemed against Reynolds long before her exit. These documents prove what we have said all along. It should have broken me. That was the plan, but I was ready. By midday, the boardroom at Hale and Carter overflowed. Clients, investors, reporters, all of them drawn to the scent of blood. Victor entered with his entourage, shoulders high, relishing the stage. Lawrence sat near the head of the table, his expression calm, unreadable. I stood. My hands no longer shook. My voice carried steady through the storm. These so-called drafts, I began, holding up the papers, are forgeries. They mimic my voice, my style, but they are not mine, and I can prove it. Whispers spread, eyes widened. I pulled out my phone, projecting the captured metadata onto the screen. Lines of code, timestamps, login IDs. At the bottom, Hale, Hale, and Carter. A silence sharp as glass cut through the room. Lawrence's jaw tightened by the smallest fraction. Every forged document traces back here, I continued, my gaze sweeping the room. Not to me, not to Reynolds, but to the firm that promised me sanctuary. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras whirring. Evelyn rose from her seat, her voice ringing with iron. I stand with Anna. If these files are what Reynolds calls evidence, then their case is built on sand. And if Hale and Carter had a hand in this, then I will not rest until the truth is carved into stone. The room erupted. Clients shouted over one another, demanding answers. Victor's smugness cracked, fury bleeding through his mask. Lawrence remained still, his calm a mask stretched too thin. I lowered the phone, my voice soft but sharp enough to cut. You wanted a puppet, Lawrence. You forged my name, thinking I would dance on your strings, but I am not yours to command. For the first time, his eyes flickered with something almost human, respect or perhaps fear. He said nothing. The meeting dissolved into chaos, but I no longer needed to stay. I gathered my folder, Evelyn close behind me, and walked out into the crisp air. Cameras flashed, questions flew, but I kept moving. That night, in the quiet of my apartment, I opened the laptop once more. The drafts folder still pulsed, stubborn and alive. I clicked, half dreading, half defying. Inside waited new files, contracts, memos, even a resignation letter. But I did not flinch this time. I copied them, sealed them, locked them away. Because now I understood. The drafts were not just traps, they were weapons. And in my hands, they no longer belonged to Hale. I closed the laptop and stared out at the city lights. Victor was finished. Hale was weakened, though not gone. The war was not over. But for the first time, the battlefield belonged to me. And when the next storm came, I would not be the hunted. I would be the one pulling the strings.